Welcome to Refinery Injury Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Refinery Injury Podcast with Brooks Harrison. Brooks is a Texas trial attorney dedicated to representing refinery and plant workers who suffer catastrophic injuries in explosions, fires, and chemical accidents across the South. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're talking about chemical exposure on the job and how these refinery injury claims are proven in court. Brooks, good to have you here.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Glad to be here. As everybody knows, this is somewhat of a learning process for me. I recently had a couple of surgeries, so there's been a couple of months of delays in getting some content out to everybody. I know there's a good number of folks who actually look forward to it. We're also moving platforms. We're kind of switching over from more of an ad, just me sitting there speaking, to more of a conversational style of communications. We plan to have on workers at the refineries. We plan to have on survivors of incidents. We plan to have on community leaders and various experts. And also we'll probably have some vendors on that work with me that help assist my clients and make my clients' life a little bit easier as well. So I just wanted to get that out of the way before we dive into all the fun stuff.
Well, awesome. I'm happy to be a part of it, happy to be part of the conversation here, and excited to chat with you. This is a little different than what a lot of times when people think of lawyers, they don't normally think of this particular niche, but I'm excited to learn more about it. It's obviously very serious stuff. Can you start by explaining what kinds of chemical exposures refinery and plant workers face the most often?
It's essentially all types of chemical exposures, and the issue is these are traditionally these are chemical plants. That's what they're actually producing. That's what the refining process is. Sometimes they're producing the ingredients of the final result of the chemical. So you'll have some refineries that are producing whatever it may be, whatever ingredient for chemical B. And then you have others that are actually refining all those different chemicals together. So the wide array is, I mean, that's ground zero for all chemicals. There's really not one chemical that everybody seems to talk about. For the most part, it's basically everything's a hazard and everything can kill you out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And what are the short-term health problems that you've seen workers develop after being exposed to dangerous chemicals on the job?
I see that a lot, and especially after starting this podcast and these ads and everything else that we're doing online, specifically on TikTok, we run into a lot of folks getting hit with hydrogen sulfide. That's like the most common. It's used to purge out lines. It's one of the most common chemicals out at any refinery. It's a gaseous substance, and it's shot through and oftentimes ends up hitting one of my clients or hits folks that we know out at the refinery. So I would say H2S is the primary culprit at the refineries today.
Okay. And when it comes to the long-term effects that are chronic conditions that you've seen, what's generally linked to refinery chemical exposure?
Well, I'll get to the acute issues with it that I didn't answer the first time. Acutely, you're going to have your eyes burning, your skin burning. It's the immediate reaction to the exposure. Over the long term, which is quite different. That's why it's so important, in my opinion, for anybody that has an acute exposure and an immediate exposure to go get checked out for no other reason than at least it's documented. You have true documentation of when that incident occurred. And so that gives you an idea in the future, because most of these chemicals have what we call latency periods. We're gonna sit here and we may be exposed today at maybe 30 years, maybe 20 years, could be 10 years, could be 5, we don't know. But there's that latency period that 10, 20, 30 years down the road, all of a sudden you have a specific type of cancer. That specific type of cancer is directly related to that type of exposure that you had. That's why it's important to document that original test and be tested in the very beginning, because then you can revert back to that test 30 years behind, 20 years back. It just depends on how far behind it is.
So you mentioned the comprehensive medical testing, thorough documentation, and how these contribute to demonstrating a worker's health issues. Like how impactful are these types of things? How impactful is the documentation and the tests to prove on the job chemical exposure?
It's how impactful. It's the only way you can prove. You don't prove much of anything with your word alone. That's what we typically call hearsay, an out of court statement offered in court for the truth of the matter asserted. What you must do is you must actually the documentation, going to the doctor itself is the documentation.
Mhm.
Get to the doctor, get checked out, just at least have a record of that, and please don't forget about it. I've actually run into that. We've had folks who had exposures 10, 20, 30 years later pop up. Those exposures happened in the 70s. They pop up in the 90s and 2000s. It's having that record is what saves them.
When it comes to environmental reports or even the workplace safety records, how impactful are those? Do those get lumped in as well to support a chemical exposure claim?
Of course they do. They do as well, but our biggest problem that we run into at refineries is they're documented just enough to cover their ass. Excuse my language, but that's
Right.
just the reality of it.
Right.
Um, yes, I mean we've had instances where we had clients report an incident, and that incident never became a recordable. Why does an incident not become a recordable? Because oftentimes safety folks are their bonuses and their wages and their pay is based upon not having recordables. So you have a tendency to brush a lot of things under the rug. But yes, it's always good to report. It's always good to have that record. It's the MSDS sheets from every single, not just the refinery, but every single unit within that refinery is important. Now, the average worker is not walking out and asking to see the science sheets on everything.
Sure.
I get that. But having at least having knowledge of what's there, so what are you exposing yourself to, is probably a good idea for any worker.
What is the typical way that a refinery or their insurer will respond when a worker reports health issues related to chemical exposure?
It depends, and I would say that is probably premise owner to premise owner. Every company's different. Uh, for the most part, if something is actually an issue and it does not feel to them, I assume, like it's badgering the company to do something they really probably shouldn't have to do, they probably get on it, and it's quite actionable. Um, I've seen that several times actually, but for the most part, it's they rely upon their engineers. They rely upon their folks on the ground within that unit to determine what is needed. Yes, as a worker, a worker should always report and should always do everything they can to document everything.
Outside of lack of documentation, are there other common errors that workers sometimes make that might jeopardize their exposure case in the future?
With refinery workers, they're kind of a macho sort. There's a lot of guys that are manly men, I would say, and they have a tendency not to want to go to the doctor. They have a tendency not to want to report, to kind of downplay any injuries or anything they may have. Those are specifically the folks that need to get to the doctor after an incident. Those are the folks who need that to be a recordable, at least documented. I mean, I can say this right now. Right now, I have two clients. There's not really anything that's going to be long term for them that we can see right now. Yes, they had exposures, chemical exposures. We ran them through all the tests. I really can't do anything for them. However, they do have this. So if something happens in the future that is relatable or can be tied into their exposure, they at least have that ability to come back and say, look, I went and talked to this lawyer. He signed me up. I went out for test, and these are the results of the test. And so they have documentation, they have proof, and they probably have a case.
You mentioned the macho aspect of things, which totally makes sense. Is there also a fear of losing a job? Is there a fear of I don't know what else would be the reason to not report?
There is always the fear. The fear of losing one's job is probably the biggest fear that gets brought up to me over and over and over. With every client, there is that fear of losing their job or being blackballed for future work. I hear that all the time. And I can say this. I've been doing this since 2004. I've represented over 1,000 injured workers, and I do not have a single client that hired us, filed their claim, litigated the hell out of their claim, won, and lost their job. I've not once have I ever seen that. Now I've heard stories about it, but not once have I ever personally witnessed it or one of my clients lose their jobs.
That's interesting, being that that is, like you said, the number one fear, and yet it's not backed up by anything, at least on your end, as far as evidence
No,
goes.
it's not at all.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me. I guess you could call that maybe just like a natural fear, but maybe not a not a relevant one, at least in that situation.
Yeah, and out at those work sites, there is always that fear is kind of all across the board, and it's one of the ways that I believe management actually chooses to manage their facilities. They the fear of you can always be replaced, and we're paying you good money. You need to shut up and work, and let's get these processes moving as fast as we can and make the most profit we can. That's really what I see more than anything.
Are chemical exposure claims more legally complicated than other types of refinery injury cases?
I wouldn't say they're more complicated. I would say they're more specialized, and within the specialization, things become more complicated. For the same reason, I wouldn't go hire the guy that cuts my grass to do my electrical work here at the house. I would definitely not uh, run off and hire my divorce lawyer to represent me in a chemical exposure case. Chemical exposure cases are unique unto themselves, just like a refinery explosion, and it does take quite a bit of experience to be successful in litigating those cases.
How hard do the refineries fight back in these cases? Does it depend? I'm sure the legal answer, it depends, kind of would come up, but as a general rule, I mean, it's not a great look to fight back against somebody who's got some sort of chemical exposure, right? So do they tend to settle more often?
Well, the truth is, I would say about 90% of cases do settle, regardless of whether they're refinery cases or not. But refinery cases in particular, yes, they ultimately they do end up settling. We even went and tried multiple sets of the British Petroleum explosion cases from Texas City, the Texas City refinery accident. We actually litigated the last two trials were our trials, and those trials never quite made it to the jury. We went all the way through beginning selecting a jury, all the way to trying the case for 9 weeks, and then as soon as it went to the jury, it settled. And it was somewhat predictable, but no, they will make you literally walk through every step until it gets to a jury. So that's why with us, every single case, we begin from the moment it walks into the office, it's going to be a trial case. Whether we end up resolving it without a trial, that's one thing. But the reality of it is, we could actually end up settling at the end of trial. So we're always prepared to go try the case, go stick them, go hit them as hard as we possibly can, get the biggest value we possibly can, because we never know if the jury's going to get to hear it or not.
Yeah, good point. For anyone, any workers that might be listening to this show, what would you like them to know about these chemical exposure claims in these cases? How, you know, as a platform, as your platform to get information out, what would be one thing that you'd like them to know about?
Well, most of the folks I'm speaking to are primarily contractors, and they're independent contractors, and they're journeymen, and they walk around and they work in many different areas on many different facilities and many different contracts based upon their specific skill or trade. And one thing I would like to say to those folks is I kind of view a contractor much the same as I view a professional athlete these days. Is you are a contractor just like the athlete's a contractor. Your body and your ability to perform is extremely important. So whenever you're exposed to something, it's not running around trying to make up an injury or look for a lawsuit. Take the little bit of time and go down to the clinic, go get your diagnostic test for whatever exposure is, and you can file it away, but at least have it, and at least be able to be able to look back in the future if there's any medical problems or considerations that you need to take care of.
I think that's great advice, Brooks. All right. Well, thanks for listening to today's episode of the Refinery Injury Podcast. If you or a loved one has suffered health problems from exposure from chemicals on the job, visit refineryinjury.com to learn more about your options and how Brooks and his team can help. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. We very much appreciate it. Brooks, it was great getting to know you. Great chatting with you. Looking forward to talking with you again.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.